Hey everyone, here today to talk about the rise of dictators prior to World War II. So we're going to focus on Adolf Hitler primarily, a little bit of Stalin, and a real itty little bit about Benito Mussolini. Okay, so starting here with this picture, you can see it is obviously a picture of Hitler. Um, so the significance of this picture is that this is actually the last picture that we have of Hitler alive, or even dead, I guess. And what he's doing is he's shaking hands with the Hitler Youth. And so the thing I always like to look at this, show at this picture is that look at the faces of these kids. This picture is taken in the very last days of World War II, where Germany is utterly defeated. You know, they really have nothing left. Berlin is the only city they control. The Soviets are about to take that over. And yet there were still people that were believers in Hitler. It was almost like he was a cult. Um, and here you see these like little 10, 11, 12-year-old kids, and they're going to be sent to die fighting the Soviet soldiers. And yet you look at that kid's face and he's just mesmerized by this man, this dictator, this person that's brought Germany to ruin. And I've always been fascinated that people would follow someone into absolute destruction. This guy was a failed leader at this point, yet he still had believers. Okay, I always like to kind of study these people and figure out what is it that they did to make people follow them like this. Because here you see these kids and they're just mesmerized by Hitler. Today, like I said, we're going to talk about these guys a little bit, talk about how they kind of rose to power. So here we go. Let's get started. I guess the story really starts with the Great Depression. I guess there's several causes to why some of these dictators rose. Clearly, the Treaty of Versailles did not help. The Treaty of Versailles put a lot of these European countries in really rough shape economically. And then when the Great Depression hit, things got even worse. And when things get really, really bad, people sometimes get desperate for hope. And Hitler, for all of his faults, Hitler is he's a very, very good speaker. He is a very charismatic leader. And when people in Germany were completely hopeless, Hitler gave them hope. He talked of a strong Germany. He spoke of bringing Germany back to prominence, and that was a message that resonated very well with the German people. So it's very likely that without the Treaty of Versailles crushing Germany's economy, without the Great Depression making it even worse, that a lot of these European dictators, and even Japanese dictators, probably don't come into power. But life was so difficult that people were looking for hope, and a lot of times these charismatic fascist leaders gave them that hope. All right. So here are the three big dog dictators of World War II in Europe. We have obviously Mussolini in Italy here. We have Hitler, and then we have Stalin. Okay. All three of these guys are bad dudes. Two will be our enemies. One will be our friend in World War II. So let's continue on. Here's a picture of Mussolini. A lot of times these dictators would try to create these almost like Boy Scout organizations where the youth of a nation would basically join these little clubs or whatever, and they would essentially learn to love the dictator, be indoctrinated or brainwashed, whatever you want to call it. And so then as the dictator stayed in power, his rule got stronger and stronger because these kids growing up, all they were taught was the dictator's amazing, blah, 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 and they kind of grew to love him. So here's a picture of Mussolini. You can see everyone loves him, blah, blah, blah. I've already mentioned this picture. Here's the Hitler Youth. Their saying was blood and honor, and from a very young age, many young German boys were, basically taught to love their country, love their leader, and they did up until the end. Benito Mussolini is really the first fascist dictator that we have. He's given credit with starting the government of fascism. Fascism is a very, very aggressive style of government. They actually believe that peace makes you weak and that war is really a way to make you strong. And so he started fascism, and from the get-go, Italy became a very aggressive nation. Now, Italy itself was actually a pretty weak nation. They weren't, that much of an industrial power. They didn't have a very strong military, but they still tried to be as aggressive as possible, and that is shown prior to World War II. Remember, World War II is traditionally seen as starting in 1939, but Italy actually invades Ethiopia in 1935, and conquers it by 1936. Ethiopia asked for help. France and Great Britain do nothing, which is going to encourage these dictators to do more. So Mussolini is really the first fascist dictator that we see in Europe prior to World War II. Italy is, like I said, not that strong of a nation, but they do pick on Ethiopia because they're pretty weak. Stalin, he's not a fascist dictator. He is a communist dictator, and he is a bad, bad man, even though he is our ally in World War II, which is kind of weird. He's like I said, he is our friend. Stalin's a bad dude. In Stalin's rule, we don't know exactly how many people are killed, but we know that 30 to 50 million people die as a result of Stalin's rule. Whether it's because of the Great Purge, when he came to power, he basically killed any soldiers or any politicians that did not agree with his rule, and he killed just thousands, if not millions, of his own people there. He also had this disastrous idea where he would take farms away from people and create these massive state-run farms. And these farms did so poorly that Russia actually ran out of food. And we don't know exactly, but we think that as many as 20 million people died of starvation because these massive state-run farms didn't make enough food for all the people of Russia, or the Soviet Union, excuse me. The only thing you could say he was marginally successful at is that he was able to industrialize Russia. Russia prior to World War II, or prior to World War I, excuse me, was not a very industrialized nation. And we talked about how industrialization makes you powerful. So he was able to do that to make Russia more of an industrialized nation. Okay, but he was, like I said, he was not a very nice man. He was a very mean man. He was not a family man. One of my favorite stories about Stalin is that he was able to describe his dictatorship style by telling the chicken story. So basically, the chicken story goes like this: you get a chicken, and you hold the chicken really tight against your chest, and you take your other hand and you pull all the feathers out of the chicken. You just rip all the feathers out. So you completely pluck the chicken, so the chicken is featherless. All right? Now, you've done this horrible, horrible thing to this chicken. Imagine someone just like ripped your hair out or something like that. Took your clothes off. You're sitting there naked, I'm guessing you'd want to run away, right? Not so. This chicken, once it's been completely defeathered or plucked or whatever you want to call it, you put the chicken on the ground, and the chicken doesn't run away from you. The chicken will actually rub up against your leg for warmth. Okay? So basically what Stalin's saying is, this is how you treat people. You beat the crap out of them, but you make them need you so much that they will never get rid of you. So even though Stalin was so mean and cruel to the chicken couldn't survive without him. And that was kind of Stalin's self-professed leadership, style, which is not something that I would like to live under. But anyways, some kind of just interesting things about Stalin. His first son tried to kill himself, and Stalin was reported to say, "I can't even shoot straight." Stalin did have 2 children that lived, I think. I know that the one daughter actually immigrated to Wisconsin, believe it or not, and lived her life out in Wisconsin, died maybe 10, 20 years ago. His second wife killed herself because she hated Stalin so much. Stalin reportedly used to flick cigarette butts at her when they sat at dinner together. So basically you're getting the vibe that Stalin's not a nice man. You could be close with him at one point, but then you would simply just disappear, as this picture shows. So Stalin was a bad, bad man. Now we get to Hitler here. Hitler, born in Austria, which people always say, oh, he was Austrian, not German, but Austrians are Germans. But anyways, we don't know too much about Hitler's youth. We know he had a rough life. His dad beat him. We know he was kicked out of school repeatedly. We do know that he tried to be an artist and failed at that. So he had a rough youth. We do know that for Hitler, it kind of turns around in World War II, or World War I, excuse me. He joins the military, kind of finds his calling there. He's very, very much a believer in Germany at this point. He's very, very upset when the war ends and Germany has lost. He fought very bravely, reportedly. He earned some medals and stuff like that. But he's very much angered at how World War I ends. He feels like Germany did not lose. He feels like Germany should not have lost. He feels like Germany was stabbed in the back. So he was very, very upset about how that war ended. Okay, and eventually he basically scapegoats Jewish people. He believes the Jewish people had very much anti-war sentiments throughout the war. And when you start looking at his speeches, you can start to kind of see that he indeed was a very angry man. In fact, here's a quote from his book Mein Kampf, which describes him laying in his hospital bed after he was wounded at the end of World War I by chlorine gas. He said, "There followed terrible days and even worse nights. I knew that all was lost. These nights, hatred grew in me, hatred for those responsible for this deed." So we can kind of see that the anger that Hitler felt throughout his life kind of started with World War I and how it ended, I guess. So anyways, as he becomes more of a prominent politician within Germany, he's part of the Nazi Party. You can see his speeches get much more aggressive, much more violent, much more angry. And the one thing about Hitler, as crazy as he was a fantastic public speaker. He was able to rile up the crowd. Here's a quote from one of his speeches where he says, "Blood must flow, blood must flow, blood must flow. Let's smash it up, that goddamn Jewish Republic." So there you can see, the pictures below, his hand gestures and stuff like that. But you can kind of see just the anger that's kind of boiling up within Hitler. And especially he mentions the Jewish Republic. So there you can see he's kind of scapegoating the Jewish people and stuff like that. But basically Hitler starts to rise to power. People like his message. Remember, Germany's in a really, really rough shape in the 30s. The Treaty of Versailles crushes the German economy. The Great Depression crushes the world economy. And so the German people are just looking for someone to give them hope. And Hitler's very charismatic. Hitler can rile up a crowd, like I've said. Hitler makes people believe in Germany again. So people go ahead and go with Hitler, even though that there's these hints of craziness and racism and stuff like that. People dig his message. People are very, very jacked up, and they like the idea of Germany coming back to power. And so Hitler and the Nazis, they come to power. And people always ask, well, how did the Nazis get to power? Democracy, my friends. The German people actually voted the Nazis into power. Nazis are a political party, just like Republicans and Democrats are political parties in this country. The Nazis are a political party. And they were voted into power. They had complete power, and Hitler was kind of the head of the Nazis, and so he became basically the dictator of Germany once the Nazis had complete control of Germany here. So here are some great pictures that just show kind of the frenzy that Hitler was able to whip up the German people into. Here you can see these just straight lines of Nazis and soldiers and people listening to his speeches. I mean, when you see the picture, if you can just imagine it like, in HD or an actual color and get the surround sound of what it must have been like and sounded like, it's pretty amazing. Here's another great picture. You can see the lines of German troops and stuff. Like I said, just impressive displays of Nazi or German power. And here's, I guess, the important part about Hitler is that from early on, he expressed that he had 3 goals. Okay? Number 1, he wanted to unite all the German people under one flag. Okay? So, for instance, what that means is there were several countries that had lots of ethnic Germans living in it. For instance, Austria. Austria is basically full of German people. Okay, even though that they're not part of Germany, they're full of German people. They speak German, they do the German stuff, So Hitler wants to unite all the German people under one flag. All right, he doesn't like the idea of German people being minorities in other countries. Okay, he also believes that Germany should have more territory, and they need more living space, and so he wants to expand. And he also is a raging racist, and he believes that certain races are inferior, and if allowed to live, they will essentially weaken the German blood and weaken the German nation. And so Hitler believes the German people are superior, and within Germany and within all the land that they conquer, it needs to be German people and none of these inferior races. And so, when you think about Hitler and all he does throughout World War II, he basically addresses all of these goals that he has prior to World War II. Okay? He takes over Austria because there are German people living in it. He takes over Czechoslovakia because there are German people in it. He expands to the east by taking over Poland, by taking over parts of Russia. Okay? Because he wants that land for the German people. And the people that are already there, guess what he does to them? He gets rid of them. He kills them. If you look at the Holocaust victims of World War II, the vast majority of the people killed within the Holocaust, the Jewish people and the other people. These are people that live in the Soviet Union and Poland, the places that Hitler wants for his people. Okay, so all the crazy goals that Hitler professes, he goes after. Okay, early on in Hitler's rule, there's actually a program that he starts. It's called T4, where basically he goes through and he starts killing all the people in Germany that he feels are either terminally sick, inferior, mentally handicapped, and he starts getting rid of them. He also starts mandatory sterilization programs where people that he considers to be racially inferior, he has them actually sterilized. And he actually looks to Sparta as, we talked about Sparta earlier in the year, he looks to Sparta as motivation. He basically believes that Sparta must be regarded as really the first fascist state because Sparta would kill sick, weak, and deformed children to basically keep their genetic pool strong. But basically Action T4, which I think most people have never heard of before, is where Hitler basically goes around Germany, his own country, and he basically starts killing or euthanizing, whatever you want to call it. He starts euthanizing and killing people that are mentally handicapped, people that are mentally ill, people that are just not with it, I guess. And he gets rid of them, and he makes the argument that these people are useless. They can't contribute anything to the German state, and they actually cost us money to take care of them. So we're better off by just getting rid of them. And so there still is not very much known about this. We do know that and this is a very rough number, we know between 70 and 240,000 German, mentally ill people or people that are cognitively disabled. These are people that are killed. And here's actually a poster that kind of promotes this policy. So just another example of how Hitler's a really, really bad dude. So here are some of the victims of Action T4. You can see some of the little children who have disabilities and stuff. Here's an adult who had disability and stuff. So these are people that would have been killed by Hitler's programs. So anyways, like I said, a real brief summary of these guys. Not very pleasant people. So we'll stop there for today. Have a nice day.